I had known Kelly for a long time. We first met as kids, growing up in the same small town where our families were closely connected through the local farming industry. Her dad owned the grain elevator, and mine ran the largest farm in the area. It seemed inevitable that Kelly and I would end up together, and over time we built a relationship that eventually led to marriage. Despite the occasional ups and downs, I always believed we had something solid. At first, our life together was like any other married couple's, full of happy moments and the usual challenges. But over time, I started noticing a change. Kelly became distant, and I felt the closeness we once shared was slipping away. I had no idea that this distance was just a symptom of something much bigger that I was about to discover. I'm not usually one to visit adult websites, but one hot July evening a few months ago, curiosity got the better of me. I not only browsed the content, but I also ended up paying $100 for a premium membership. What I saw that night was a live stream featuring a gorgeous woman in a steamy scene with a muscular, attractive guy. I'd seen better before, but something about this video stood out. Why? Because the woman, going by the name Jenna, was actually my wife, Kelly. The site, Nature's Pleasure Spa, was aptly named because she was definitely having hot Zexand, enjoying every bit of it. As Kelly rolled over on the bed looking completely satisfied, the guy grinned and said, "Well, darling, that was pretty damn good. Bet your old man never makes you climax like that, huh?" "Hot housewife Jenna?" My Kelly smiled back and said without missing a beat, "Well, Mario, that was good, no doubt. But for the record, no one lights me up like my husband. I've been with a few guys, but no one makes me happy like he does. You're good, but he's amazing, so don't stop trying." She smiled again. Mario looked puzzled and asked, "Well, if he's so amazing, why are you cheating on him by coming here and being with me?" She responded, still smiling. "I didn't plan on this happening, but I love Zex, and I'm glad you take care of me. I also do it because I can get away with it and he'll never know. I truly love my husband with all my heart, and after these 3 nights here, I realize just how much better he is than what I get here. It makes me love and appreciate him even more." She laughed and added, "Actually, I'm probably doing him a favor by coming here and doing this, so come on over and drill me again." Like I said earlier, the $100 was money well spent because it allowed me to see what was going on with my loving wife, and it cost a lot less than hiring a private investigator or buying surveillance equipment. You're probably wondering how I got to this point. What led me to visit that site in the first place? It's a fair question, and the most honest answer I can give is that it was just a fluke, a stroke of luck. Not that my wife was sleeping with Mario, but that I found out she was cheating. Kelly and I have been married for just over 8 years. We first met in elementary school and grew up in a small town in central Illinois. She lived in town and I lived in the country. Her dad owned the largest grain elevator, and my dad owned the biggest farm. Since our parents did business together, it was natural for us to meet and become friends. I won't bore you with childhood crushes, high school romance, or even college. We both dated other people and yes, slept with others. We weren't exclusive. But deep down, I think we always knew we belonged together. Oh, and yes, I was the one who took her pureness, though there were others for both of us along the way. During our junior year at the University of Illinois, we decided to be exclusive. A bit later, I proposed, and about 1.5 years later, just a week after graduation, we were married. Life seemed good, at least I thought it was, until that night in July. But anyway, back to the story. 3 years ago, Kelly's parents retired and moved to Phoenix, Arizona. Kelly, along with her sister Amber and brothers Tom and Carl Gentry, bought a 48% stake in the family grain business from their father, Tom Sr. He wanted to keep controlling interest for a few years to back their growth financially. Over time, he planned to reduce his stake until they owned the business outright. Amber is married to my friend Walter Swanson, who also happens to be a grain farmer. His farm is just a bit smaller than mine, and since we live nearby, we spend a lot of time together. Tom and Carl manage the grain business together, while Kelly handles the finances and bookkeeping. Amber also works there, managing customer relations and grain sales. It's a true family-run operation, with a few additional employees, mostly truck drivers and grain handlers. During the busy harvest season, they hire some part-time help as well. That's enough background. Now let me get back to the story of how I discovered my wife cheating online and what unfolded afterward. All 4 of the Gentry siblings put a lot of effort into finalizing the deal to buy out their father's share of the grain business. I wasn't too involved in it, but I knew they had to work hard to make it happen. There were meetings with banks, The Illinois Department of Agriculture and insurance companies. By the time it was all settled, they were exhausted. Luckily, this all took place during winter, their slowest time of year. As for me, it was after harvest, so I didn't need Kelly's help on the farm as much as I would during the busy season. While she doesn't work on the farm directly, with 2,200 acres of corn and soybeans, planting and harvest times are hectic, and I rely on Kelly to run errands and assist where needed. You get the idea. Since things were slow, Kelly and Amber decided to treat themselves to a few days at a spa to unwind. They booked a 3-night stay at a place called Princess Spas. I know I previously mentioned Nature's Pleasures Spa, but that's the name of the website. Princess Spas is the actual spa. The ladies came back so relaxed and refreshed that they made it a yearly tradition, booking another stay the following July, after planting season was over. It was during that weekend spa visit that I stumbled upon the video. But how did I find it in the first place? Dan Marvel, the field agent for the Illinois Department of Agriculture in our area, stopped by one day during his routine rounds. Kelly and I knew Dan from college. When he asked about her, I mentioned she was on a getaway at Princess Spas. He gave me a strange look and mentioned that something odd was going on there that I might want to check out. He said his cousin used to work there as a masseuse and had shared some wild stories. He also said they had a website with a different name, something with pleasures in it. He didn't give me many details, just advised me to look into it. Well, I'm someone who likes to poke around the internet. I browse different sites, sometimes even stumbling on some spicy content, but usually it's just for fun. That night, curiosity got the better of me, and I did some searching. It didn't take long before I found Nature's Pleasures Spa and its live stream, and that's when everything unraveled. But you already know what happened next. I was devastated. I cried, yelled, got angry, then fell into a deep depression. All the emotions you'd expect when discovering your spouse is cheating. And it wasn't just this one time. I soon realized this wasn't Kelly's first affair. Nature's Pleasures Spa had an archive section, and I found videos from Kelly's previous visits, as well as the ones from the current trip. With the premium membership, I could download each video for an extra $20. I downloaded 2 videos from her first visit, 3 from her second, and 3 from this current trip. 8 videos in total. So, for $260, I had all the evidence I needed to divorce my wife. I didn't have a clear plan yet, but I knew I had to act quickly. I wasn't going to wait a month or even a week to confront her. As far as I was concerned, the sooner we split up, the better. Kelly had slept with at least 2 men, Mario and Steve, 8 times, and I had video proof. I didn't care if there were more, it was already too much. I made several copies of the videos onto DVDs and stored them in a very safe place. When my father built our house, he had a wall safe installed, hidden behind a panel in the office bookcase. Once the copies were secure, I deleted everything related to Nature's Pleasures Spa from my computer, including the original files. Other than the DVDs, there was no longer any digital trail. With that taken care of, I grabbed my phone and sent Kelly a message. Kelly, it's Jack. I know exactly what you're doing at Princess Spa, and I have evidence to prove it. Don't bother coming back to the house. This is no longer your home, and soon I won't be your husband. We're done. My lawyer will be in touch in the next few days to arrange for you to collect your belongings. Apparently, Kelly had turned off her phone and didn't get my message until the next morning, as I didn't hear from her that night. But early the following day, my phone started ringing. I saw it was Kelly calling, so I let it go to voicemail. Soon after, I heard her message. Jack? What are you talking about? Honey, I have no idea what's going on. Why would you send me such terrible messages? Amber and I are packing up now, and I'll be home in a couple of hours. Whatever you're thinking, you're wrong. I'll see you when I get home so we can talk. I love you, Jack. A little while later, she called again, and I ignored it. The voicemail was nearly identical, word for word. I began to wonder if she'd written it down, knowing I wouldn't answer. Soon after, a text came through. Again, almost the same message. Since I wasn't going to talk to her, I sent a short text back to acknowledge her messages, but keep my distance. Maybe Mario knows what I'm talking about, honey. Would you have him call me if I asked? And as I said before, don't come back to the house. You're not welcome here. We're done, Kelly. I didn't get any more texts, but later that afternoon she called again and left another voicemail. Jack, we need to talk. I'm staying with Amber until we clear up this awful misunderstanding. Please call me so we can talk. That was Sunday afternoon, and I didn't return her call. The next morning, I went to my bank and arranged for a second safe deposit box in my name only. I placed one copy of the DVDs in the box, along with the original prenuptial agreement. I had a meeting scheduled with my lawyer at 11 a.m., so I made another copy of the prenup just in case there was any issue. When I arrived at my lawyer's office, I saw Kelly sitting there. She looked up at me, and I could see she was in rough shape. Her hair was a mess, and she had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept. Kelly said, "Jack, we need to talk about this." I asked, "How did you know I'd be here?" She replied, "Richard called me when you made the appointment." At that moment, Richard Warner, my attorney, came out and asked us both to come into his office. My anger was boiling over, so I said, "No, Richard, we're not going in together. You've lost my trust by calling Kelly. I need to know right now, are you representing me and only me?" Lawyers are supposed to be smart, but Richard missed the memo because he said, "No, Jack, if this proceeds, I'll be representing Kelly." Turns out he thought the grain business was a better client than my farm. Maybe it was, since he had the Gentry family as clients too. I had my opinion about that, and I figured he'd realize his mistake eventually. Fine, Richard. I want all my original documents and copies of contracts ready by 4 p.m. today. I'll either pick them up or send a courier. I've appreciated your work in the past, but you're making a big mistake. My new attorney will contact you soon. Kelly stayed silent, but then pleaded, "Jack, why won't you talk to me and straighten this out? Because, Kelly, it's clear Richard values you more as a client, and I'm not having this conversation without legal representation." Richard chimed in, "Jack, you know I've always been fair with you. You have nothing to worry about." "Oh, Richard, I have plenty to worry about. You can't serve two masters, and it's clear where your loyalty lies, and you've already shown I can't trust you by calling Kelly." With that, I said goodbye and left. I could hear Kelly starting to cry as I walked out the door. Now I had to find a new attorney. I knew David Warner, Richard's brother, was a skilled attorney and competitive with Richard. He seemed like a good option, but I wanted to do some research first. Attorneys, accountants, bankers, and insurance agents are people you need to trust completely, and I wanted to be sure. I knew a few people who had worked with David, so I called his office to ask for references. The secretary sent me a list, and 4 friends of mine were on it. I stopped by to see 3 of them, and they all gave glowing reviews of David's work, so it didn't take long for me to make up my mind. I had no doubt David would do a good job for me. I didn't visit the 4th friend on the reference list because it was Wally, and I didn't want to involve him since he's married to Amber, Kelly's sister. I called David's office again, gave my name, and asked if I could schedule an appointment for after 4 p.m. The receptionist said he was busy until 4:30, but would check if he could meet after that. I knew there was a chance he wouldn't be able to, but I had to try. When she came back on the line, she said, "Mr. Warner can see you at 4:30, but it'll have to be brief as he has other evening commitments." I agreed and confirmed I'd be there. "I look forward to seeing you then, Mr. Hagen. By the way, my name is Samantha, and I'm David's wife." At 4 p.m., I stopped by Richard's office to collect my paperwork. They hadn't finished copying it yet. It was obvious they were stalling, hoping I'd changed my mind. I lost my temper and told them I needed every piece of legal paperwork within 15 minutes, or my new attorney would follow up. They asked who my new attorney was, and I told them they'd find out soon enough. After that, the office went into overdrive, with 3 people copying documents at once. 20 minutes later, I had everything. I still had time to make it to David's office for my appointment, so I didn't make a bigger fuss about the slight delay. I met with David, and he agreed to become both my personal and business attorney. I asked if I could leave all the documents I'd retrieved with him for safekeeping, and he agreed to store them in his vault until we could review them together. We scheduled an appointment for the next day, Tuesday at 9 a.m., to go over everything and plan for the divorce. When I left his office around 5:30, I smiled at Samantha and asked, "So, Samantha, am I in trouble or are your evening plans still on?" She smiled and said, "You did just fine, Mr. Hagen. Our evening is still on as planned. I wish all our clients were as punctual as you've been, but please call me Sam from now on." "Thanks, Sam, and you can call me Jack." The next morning, we reviewed all my business paperwork and contracts. I can't share details, attorney-client privilege and all that, but I can say David found everything to be in good order from a business standpoint. We broke for lunch, and David and Sam invited me to join them at the local diner. I agreed and met them there as I needed to stop by my bank first. They were a delightful couple, and we had a pleasant lunch. I learned they'd been married for about 10 years and had 2 daughters, ages 6 and 3. They showed me pictures, and the girls were adorable, looking just like their mom. They had beautiful smiles, just like Sam. That lunch lifted my spirits, making my transition to working with David easier. But it also saddened me because I realized my life partner wasn't with me anymore. Seeing how happy David and Sam were reminded me of how things had been with Kelly before I discovered her cheating. It brought tears to my eyes a few times. David didn't notice, but Sam did, and I could see the concern in her eyes. After lunch, I stopped by the bank and made some changes to protect my assets. I also picked up a $5,000 check payable to David Warner Law Offices as a retainer. David hadn't asked for anything yet, but I knew he'd appreciate the gesture. I returned to the office at 1:30 to continue our meeting. Sam greeted me and mentioned David was on the phone, then led me to the small conference room where we'd been meeting. She asked if I wanted coffee or anything else, and I said I was fine. She sat down next to me and reached out her hand. David didn't tell me what's going on, Jack, but based on your reactions at lunch, I can guess what this afternoon is about. I see you're wearing a wedding ring, so I'm assuming it's about your wife. If you'd like, I'd be happy to sit in on the meeting this afternoon while we discuss whatever you need to share. I was on the verge of breaking down again, so I just nodded. My anger had subsided for the moment, and the pain was overwhelming. It felt right to have a woman's presence for the sensitivity and comfort they can offer. I realized I might need Sam's support during this difficult time. In the afternoon meeting, I told the full story of how I discovered Kelly's infidelity. I broke down a few times, and Sam was there to comfort me. After regaining my composure, I explained my intentions. Unless something changes my mind, I'm planning to file for divorce and enforce the prenuptial agreement. David and I went over the prenup in detail. The terms were clear. I would retain 100% of my farm assets, real estate, and personal property. Kelly would keep her grain business assets. She'd be entitled to 50% of our financial assets if there was no infidelity, but only $25,000 for each year of marriage if there was. Household personal property would be split 50/50ths, no matter the circumstances. David then said, "Jack, I need you to show me proof of the infidelity." "No, David, I have the proof, but I'm not showing it to anyone unless we're forced to go to court. Then I'll present it to the judge." David insisted, "Jack, I really need to see it to ensure we have a solid case for infidelity." "David, you're going to have to trust me. I have the proof, but I loved Kelly, and I don't want anyone seeing what I've seen unless it's absolutely necessary." Sam gently touched David's arm and gave him a nod, signaling for him to back off. David reluctantly agreed. Over the next few days, Kelly called me several times, leaving messages, but I never answered. I deleted her voicemails without even listening to them. Then, David called to tell me we had a meeting scheduled with Kelly and her lawyer, Richard, for Thursday at 10:30 a.m. When Thursday came, David and I drove to Richard's office. As we arrived, I noticed Kelly's car in the parking lot, so we headed straight inside. Richard's receptionist showed us to a small conference room, and after just a couple of minutes, Richard and Kelly walked in. Kelly looked much better than the last time I had seen her. It was clear she had made an effort for this meeting. She was undeniably beautiful. I fought hard to keep my emotions hidden, not wanting her to see how much my heart ached. She smiled and said, "Jack, I hope we can finally talk and resolve this misunderstanding. I miss you, and I want to come home." I stayed silent, knowing my voice would betray me if I spoke. I needed to get a grip on my emotions, and it wasn't going to be easy. David started, "We're here to discuss the divorce proceedings for the dissolution of Jack and Kelly's marriage. I believe it's important to give both parties time to express their thoughts on how to move forward." Richard nodded in agreement and added, "My client believes this is a misunderstanding and would like the chance to clear the air with her husband." That was it. My anger flared up, helping me regain control of my emotions. I looked at Kelly and said, "Kelly, here are the facts. When we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement, and we updated it 2 years ago when you bought into your father's business. I've brought copies of the updated agreement for everyone." Kelly looked surprised and said softly, "But Jack, I don't want a divorce. I want to be your wife. Can't we move past this and be happy again?" I barely acknowledged her words and continued. The prenup was meant to protect our individual interests while still allowing us to benefit from marriage. Initially, it was to protect the assets that have been in my family for generations. When you bought into your father's business, we updated it to protect your family's assets as well in case of divorce. The agreement clearly states that I retain 100% of my family's assets, and you retain 100% of yours. Debts related to those assets remain with the businesses, and neither party is responsible for the other's debts. Our shared marital assets are separate, and the agreement outlines the specific division of those assets depending on the circumstances of the divorce. I continued, As stated in this document, you are entitled to your personal belongings, your clothing, jewelry, car, and anything else that I have no interest in. The same applies to me. All non-farm personal property, furniture, electronics, and artwork will be split 50/50ths. Farm-related property, grain bins, machinery, equipment, stays 100% mine since it's part of the farm operation. Financially, in the event of divorce, you are entitled to 50% of our financial assets if there has been no infidelity. There are 2 exceptions to this. If you divorce me for infidelity, I receive only $25,000 per year, or $200,000 total, not 50%. If I divorce you for infidelity, you receive $25,000 per year, or $200,000 total, not 50%. I paused before saying, Kelly, I'm going to ask you some questions. How you answer will determine whether I move forward with the divorce and on what grounds. That will also determine any financial distribution. If our marriage has any chance of surviving, you need to be completely honest. If you refuse to answer or lie, it's over. Do you understand? Are you willing to do this to try and save our marriage? Kelly, looking stunned by the details of the prenup, snapped out of it and said, Yes, Jack, I'll answer your questions honestly. I love you, and I want our marriage to survive. I'll do whatever it takes for you to let me come home. Kelly, I'd like to record these questions. Are you okay with that? She hesitated and looked at Richard, who had stayed quiet up until now. Richard, in typical lawyer fashion, said, Kelly, I'd advise against it, but it's up to you. David added, Kelly, I agree with Richard. I'd advise against recording, but it's Jack you need to convince, not Richard or me. So do what you think is right. Kelly replied, I'll do anything to clear up this misunderstanding. Yes, go ahead and record it. I'm fine with recording whatever Jack and I discuss. David and I had brought a tape recorder, so we set it on the table to ensure everyone's voices were clearly captured. Kelly then asked, Jack, what are your questions? I began, Kelly, I want to ask if you've been faithful to me, but I'm going to break it into 3 time periods. The first is from the day we agreed to be exclusive until the day we got engaged. Were you faithful to me during that time? Kelly smiled and answered confidently, Yes, Jack, I was faithful to you during that period. I stared at her and said, Well, that's your first lie. You couldn't even answer the very first question honestly. I should walk out right now, but I won't. Yet. Are you really telling me you didn't sleep with Larry Evandale just 2 days after we agreed to be exclusive? Is that what you're saying? Larry wasn't the type to keep things to himself. He bragged to me that you invited him over on a Tuesday night when your parents weren't home, and he had sex with you in your bed. Oh, and Kelly, he also told me you didn't use a rubber. He even smirked and said, Bareback's way more fun when you're with a promiscuous. His parting shot as he walked away was, Jack, she loved it. And I'm sure I'll get a repeat performance, probably even after you marry the promiscuous. You might say he made it all up, but Amber overheard him. She came over to me and said, Jack, Kelly loves you. She won't cheat on you again. That was just a one-time thing, a goodbye to him. Don't do anything rash. Oh, and by the way, he lied. He used rubbers. I saw the wrappers in the trash the next morning. So, Kelly, you've already lied to me. I'll let this one slide, but there won't be any more passes. Tell the truth, or face the consequences. Kelly looked devastated. I'm sorry, Jack. I was wrong. I continued. After that, I didn't trust you. I watched you closely for 6 months. In that time, you didn't do anything suspicious, so I asked you to marry me and gave you the ring. I know you were probably hoping I'd ask sooner, but I wasn't ready to trust you, so you had to wait. Now here's question 2. During our engagement, from the time you got the ring until the day we got married, did you cheat on me? She didn't hesitate. No, absolutely not. I replied, I know that's true because I still didn't trust you completely, so I kept an eye on you for that whole year. I was pretty sure you were faithful during that time. Seeing how emotional Kelly was getting, Richard asked for a break to talk with her. She was clearly shaken by the revelation about Larry Evandale. We took a break for lunch, and David and I picked up Sam to go to the local diner. At lunch, Sam asked how things were going, and David said, I think Jack's handling it well. Not much has come out yet, but he's laid the foundation for getting honest answers about the marriage. If she admits everything, he may still want a divorce, but he'll know she's trying to save the marriage. It's a tough call, but I think Jack will make the right decision. Of course, if she lies, he'll have to figure out his next step. Sam gave me a knowing look. Her intuition had clearly picked up on my pain. I gave her a weak smile and said, This is hard. Why do people do such stupid things and cause so much pain for themselves and the ones they love? She reached over, put her hand on mine, and said, If only we knew, Jack. Maybe we could slap some sense into them before they did something so stupid. That made me laugh, and David joined in. Even during a tough time, I found a way to laugh, which says a lot about the resilience of people. We cry at funerals, but can still laugh. I guess people grieve during divorces, but also find humor. I smiled at Sam and said, "Thanks, Sam. I needed that." She nodded, and we headed back to Richard's office around 1 p.m. Once back in the meeting, I reminded Kelly, "You need to answer honestly. If you lie, this meeting ends, and there's no hope for our marriage. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand," Kelly replied, clearly shaken. "I will tell you the truth." I asked, "From the day we were married until today? Have you ever cheated on me?" Tears filled her eyes, and I could see how hard this was for her. But I couldn't let her off the hook. I needed her to be honest, to prove she cared enough about our marriage to come clean. I wasn't sure if I could stop the divorce, but if she told the whole truth, I'd know she was trying. "Yes, Jack," she said quietly, tears falling. "I did cheat on you." She then dropped her head onto her crossed arms on the table and sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Jack. Can you ever forgive me?" I asked Richard and David to leave the room because I had more questions for Kelly and didn't want to embarrass her in front of them. Both lawyers objected, but I insisted, and Kelly nodded at Richard, signaling that she wanted him to leave too. I already had her confession on tape, which was enough for the divorce proceedings. I didn't want the rest of the conversation recorded, so I turned off the recorder. "Kelly, I need you to answer these questions. When, where, who, and why?" I asked, doing my best to stay calm. Sniffling, she whispered, "Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry. It happened this weekend at Princess Spa. One of the masseurs, Mario, is the one I cheated with." "Why?" I asked. "I don't know exactly, Jack. It was just the passion of the moment. Amber and I were having such a great day, and after dinner we decided to get massages before bed. Mario was my masseuse. I was lying on my stomach, and he started the massage. His hands were soft but strong, and it felt so good. He worked on my arms, shoulders, and back, then moved to my legs and inner thighs, stopping just short of being too close. After that, he started again on my back and shoulders, and I was still tense. I felt him untie my bikini top and pull it down. I have to admit, it felt great, and I didn't stop him." She started crying again. "Jack, if I could go back, I never would have let it happen. We wouldn't be in this situation. You have to believe me." As much as it hurt to hear it, I needed her to tell me everything, not because I was curious, but because I needed to see how honest she'd be. "Go on, Kelly, tell me the rest," I urged. "There's nothing more to tell," she said through her tears. "We had sex." She fell silent, and I waited, hoping she would say more. But she just sat there with her head down, sniffling. Eventually, she looked up at me and asked, "Jack, is there any chance you'll forgive me?" Not wanting this to feel like a court hearing, even though it did, I asked, "Kelly, is this the whole truth? Nothing but the truth?" She gave me a look I hadn't seen before, a mix of uncertainty and fear, as if she was calculating how much I knew. Finally, she said, "Yes, Jack, that's the truth. I'm so sorry." My heart was breaking, but I managed to keep my composure. I got up from the table and called David and Richard back into the room. "This meeting is over," I said coldly. Before leaving, I turned to Kelly and said, "I'm divorcing you on the grounds of infidelity. The terms of the prenuptial agreement will be enforced." She was shocked and cried out, "But why? Jack, I confessed. I'm begging you to forgive me. Please, Jack, I love you. Please forgive me." "You lied to me, Kelly. You didn't care enough about our marriage to tell me everything. If you had been completely honest, maybe I could have considered staying. But you didn't even give us a chance. You thought you could get away with just one confession, but you lied. It's over." I turned to leave, but she screamed, "Wait, Jack! I'll tell you everything. Please don't leave me." I spun around and glared at her, my anger and hurt clear. "You were warned. You had your chance, but you tried to get away with one confession. You lied. It's over." David caught up with me as I was getting into my car. "Jack, are you sure you want to file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity?" he asked. "Yes, I do. She had her chance, and I misjudged her all these years. I wanted her to care enough to tell me everything, but she couldn't even be honest. Go ahead and file." I drove home feeling numb, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat at my desk. I drank the first one quickly, then sipped the second, reflecting on everything that had just happened. I had multiple copies of the videos safely stored, But now, I didn't think I'd need them since I had her confession. Suddenly it hit me. I had walked out of the office without the tape of Kelly's confession. I immediately called David. "David, did you grab the tape recording of Kelly's confession before you came after me?" "Oh, damn," I heard him say. "No, Jack, I didn't. I was so focused on catching up with you that I forgot the tape." I cursed under my breath. I had been so careful in planning everything, but in my anger and pain, I had made a huge mistake by leaving the tape behind. "David, why don't you call Richard and see if you can pick it up?" Though I'm guessing their answer will be something like, "We thought you had everything when you left, so we erased it." Sorry. I hung up, still feeling sick about the situation. I had enough evidence to file for infidelity, but I hadn't wanted to use the videos unless it was absolutely necessary. After I hung up with David, I grabbed another beer from the fridge. Damn, how could I be so careless? I wasn't drunk, but I wasn't feeling much pain either. As I sat watching the evening news before bed, I thought I heard a vehicle pull into the yard. Slowly, I got up from my chair and went to the back door. I stepped out onto the porch, and it was dark for a few moments before the lights went out. Suddenly, something shot me on the back of the head, and I saw a bright flash of light. Then, everything went completely dark. Beep, beep, beep. That was the first sound I heard. It didn't take long to realize it was coming from right beside me. I opened my eyes and tried to turn slightly to the right to see what it was. But as soon as I moved, an excruciating pain shot through my chest and straight into my head, causing flashes of blue and silver stars. What the hell? I thought. Then I heard a rustling sound nearby, followed by a surge of something into my body, and I was out again. The next time I woke up to the beeping, I opened my eyes and looked around, being careful not to move. I'd learned my lesson from the first time. A nurse was sitting in a chair beside me. "Hi, Jack. I'm Susan, your nurse. Please don't try to move, okay? You're going to be fine, and I'll explain everything to you. But for now, just stay still. Do you understand?" I couldn't speak because something was lodged down my throat, but I nodded slightly to show that I understood. "Jack, I need to tell the doctor you're awake. We'll be back soon." I nodded again. It finally clicked that I must be in a hospital, though I had no memory of how I got there. I figured someone would fill me in eventually, so I closed my eyes and waited. "Mr. Hagen, Jack, I'm Dr. Julius. You've suffered serious injuries from a striking during a robbery at your home. Now that you're awake, I'm confident you'll be okay. We had to restrain you to prevent you from injuring yourself further by moving too much. I'm sure you felt severe pain when you tried to move yesterday, right?" A faint smile crossed my face as I nodded. "Yes, we should have done more to prevent that. I'm sorry you experienced that pain." He turned to the nurse. "Nurse Johnson, I think we can remove the restraints now. But Jack, please don't try to do anything on your own just yet, okay?" I nodded again and gestured to the tube in my throat. "We'll also remove the ventilator now. Nurse Johnson will handle it." Once they removed the restraints and the ventilator, my throat felt like it was on fire, and I couldn't speak at first. They gave me a small sip of water, and eventually I was able to whisper, though my voice was raspy and painful. "Can someone tell me what happened?" I croaked. "Jack, it's 7 a.m. and you've just regained consciousness and come off the ventilator. Your throat will hurt for a few hours, and we want you to rest. Nurse Johnson will stay with you, and once you're more stable, we'll notify the police that you're able to talk. They'll explain everything that happened. Medically speaking, you've sustained serious injuries, including a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and multiple contusions. One of your ribs punctured a lung, causing it to collapse. But the EMTs got to you in time and were able to revive you. After we repaired your lung, we reinflated it. You're very lucky, Jack. Had you not been found when you were, you likely would have died. To put it bluntly, you were stricken severely. You were unconscious for 5 days. You briefly woke up yesterday, but then passed out again until now. We'll keep a close watch on you for the next few days, but you should be able to go home after that." As promised, I spent the rest of the day resting, with Nurse Johnson by my side. Anytime I moved too quickly, sharp pains shot through my body, so I stayed as still as possible. By the afternoon, I was able to sit up with help, and even managed to use the bathroom with assistance. As I spent more time with Susan, we talked, and I learned that she had been 3 years behind me in school. Her maiden name was Susan Fisk, and she had married Chad Johnson. They had a 3-year-old daughter named Emily, but Susan had divorced Chad after finding out he was unfaithful. I told her about Kelly, and she was sympathetic. The next morning, 2 detectives, Harold Robbins and Josh Carter, came to see me. Before they started questioning me, I asked them to explain what had happened to me. Detective Robbins started. "It appears to have been a robbery that escalated into an attack. We found a 2x4 on your porch with your hair and blood on it. There were no fingerprints, likely because the person wore gloves. There weren't any signs of forced entry, but that's probably because you stepped onto the porch and left the door open. Inside the house, we found several missing pictures from the walls, an empty strongbox in your desk drawer, and ransacked file cabinets. The bedrooms were also searched, with empty drawers and jewelry boxes in the master bedroom. We're not entirely sure what was taken, Detective Carter continued. When you're able to return home, we'll need you to go through everything to see what's missing. The doctor said it could be 3 or 4 days before you're discharged. After that, we'll work with you to update our reports. Robbins took over again. We need to ask you a few questions, Jack. What do you remember about the attack? I sighed. Not much, honestly. I had a couple of beers and was watching the evening news when I heard a vehicle pull into the yard. I got up to check it out and stepped onto the porch. I saw a shadowy figure and then everything went black. I don't remember anything after that until I woke up here yesterday. I wish I could be more helpful. Robbins nodded. That's okay, Jack. We still need to ask a few more questions to help piece this together. Where was your wife during the incident? My wife and I are separated. We're in the process of divorcing, so I have no idea where she was. Mind if I call you Jack? Robbins asked. Of course, that's fine, I replied. Is the divorce amicable, or is there tension between you two? I thought for a moment. You could say it's not going smoothly. She's contesting the grounds I'm filing under. And what grounds are those? Robbins asked. Infidelity. We have a prenuptial agreement, and if the divorce is filed under those terms, her settlement will be much smaller. That's what she's fighting. Robbins exchanged a glance with Carter before asking, Do you think that could give her a motive to hurt you? I don't believe she would do something like that, I answered firmly. I just don't. Robbins didn't argue, but made a note. We'll check into it just to cover all bases. Is there anyone else who might want to damage you? Any business conflicts, disputes with neighbors, or issues with family? I shook my head. No, nothing that comes to mind. Okay, Jack. When you're feeling up to it, we'll need to do a full inventory of what's missing. I do have a couple of specific questions. Did you keep any cash in the house, especially in that strongbox? And if so, how much? Also, was there anything else of significant value, like jewelry or artwork? Yes, I said. There was some cash in the strongbox, probably around $8,000. I usually keep about $10,000, but I had spent some recently, so it was a little less. As for jewelry, there were a few pieces worth over $1,000, but I can't think of anything else with significant value. I hesitated before adding, I didn't mention this earlier, but I have a hidden safe behind the bookcase. I'm pretty sure it wasn't found, and I'd prefer to keep it that way if possible. Robbins raised an eyebrow, but didn't push the issue. Fair enough. If you think of anything else, let us know. When you're ready to return home, give us a call and we'll help you take stock of everything. Over the next few days, I slowly got better. I had plenty of time to rest, and when I was awake, I talked with Susan. I had a few visitors, Wally, Amber, David, and Sam. Kelly and her family, except for Amber, didn't come, which made sense given the situation, but I would have appreciated it. Richard, Kelly's lawyer and my old friend, did visit, and I was glad to see him. Everyone who stopped by showed concern and wished me well. Amber and Sam left with tears in their eyes, each giving me a kiss on the cheek. Those 4 days were tough. I slept a lot but had nightmares that left me waking up in a panic, sometimes screaming without remembering the dream. Susan was always there to calm me with kind words and a gentle touch. I later found out she stayed at the hospital even when she wasn't working. She said my situation reminded her of her own marriage, and she felt the need to support me. While I appreciated her kindness, my life was too chaotic to consider a deeper relationship, though I said I'd like to stay in touch. When it was time for my discharge, Dr. Julius let me know, and I was relieved to finally go home. Susan helped me pack up and wheeled me out to the lobby where Wally and Amber were waiting. She gave me a big hug, and I could tell she really cared, but I wasn't in a place to think about more than friendship. At home, I was greeted by the mess left behind. Wally and Amber offered to help, but I wanted to go through everything myself first. I promised to call them when I was ready for their help, and they agreed reluctantly. The first thing I did was check the safe behind the bookcase. Everything was still there: cash, certificates, stocks, bonds, and the DVD of Kelly's affair. My laptop and a few Terry Redland prints were gone, but not much else. Some bank and credit card statements had been moved, so I called the banks to warn them my account numbers might have been compromised. Weeks went by, but the robbery investigation moved slowly. Detectives Robbins and Carter kept me updated, but there were no leads since nothing high value had been taken. It was turning into a cold case. They had asked about Kelly, but I insisted she wouldn't have injured me, as she would have received many of the items in the divorce anyway. They seemed to agree and didn't pursue it further. I opened new bank accounts and ordered new checks for safety, though no suspicious activity had been reported. I also bought a new laptop and reorganized my office. Then, one day, while sorting through bills, I saw a statement from Reds Inc., which stood for Remote Electronic Data Storage Solutions. I had video surveillance of my property that was backed up to Reds each night. I hadn't deleted anything from the day of the robbery, so I logged into Reds, found the footage from that day, and downloaded it to my laptop. If the quality was good enough, I planned to give it to the detectives to possibly reopen the investigation and find some answers. As I reviewed the footage, I realized there was nothing useful to give the detectives. I knew then the crime would never be solved. After paying my bills, I started focusing on how to move forward. I reached out to an old college friend who worked at Cargill, one of the biggest grain merchandisers in the U.S., and through him, I arranged a meeting with their acquisition team. It's amazing what connections can do. Within 2 weeks, I had a plan in place with Cargill. I took a brief trip to Las Vegas after handling some business in Phoenix, gambled for a couple of days, then flew home to put my plans into action. I had David arrange a meeting with Gentry Grain where I talked to Kelly, her brothers Tom and Carl, and her sister Amber. David mentioned that with our impending divorce, the grain reserves wouldn't meet state requirements without my share. They quickly agreed to meet, likely because they hadn't thought about the impact of losing my stored grain. At the meeting, I greeted everyone and got straight to the point. I told them to listen before commenting and made it clear that resolving the divorce was my priority. I handed Kelly the final draft of the papers and asked her to sign them. Kelly responded, "Jack, I don't want a divorce. Whatever you think I did isn't worth ending everything we had. Can't we work through this? I don't want to do this in front of my family." I told her firmly, "Kelly, this ends today. The sooner you sign, the sooner we can move on." She grew angry and said, "If you're divorcing me, I'll fight the infidelity claim. That's the least you can do for me." I expected this. I placed a DVD on the table with the divorce papers and said, "If you fight me on this, I'll use this as evidence in court. It's a video of all 8 times you cheated on me at the spa." Amber was shocked and furious, exclaiming, "You didn't, Kelly. How could you?" I confirmed it, detailing each incident with Mario and Steve. "So yes, 8 videos. Sign the divorce papers now, or this goes to court. I'm done playing games." Tom and Carl were stunned, while Amber quietly cried as Kelly signed the divorce papers. I took my copies and put them in my briefcase. Kelly looked shocked, with unshed tears, likely realizing I had solid evidence of her infidelity. But I wasn't done yet. Now, let's discuss the grain issue. With this divorce, you'll lose the value of my stored grain, putting you in violation of your grain license and loan covenants. The bad news? You're in trouble. The good news? I spoke to your father, and he sold me his 52% share of the business since your agreement didn't have a first right of refusal clause. Richard didn't do his best work for you. I didn't even have to show him the proof of your cheating. He believed me and knew the company would struggle without my grain. So now I'm the majority shareholder. You each own 12%, and I've already negotiated a deal to sell my stake to Cargill. You can sell your shares for the same price, and I recommend you do so. Cargill will now evaluate the staff, but I secured each of you a 1-year job guarantee. Make the most of it. The shock turned to anger, and Tom, the eldest, finally spoke up. "What have you done, Jack? You ruined the family business because my sister cheated on you. How did you trick my father into selling?" I replied, "Your father sold his stock to keep you, Carl and Kelly, out of jail. You ask what kind of man I am. Ask yourselves what kind of people you are." I tossed a second DVD onto the table. "This shows you and Carl knocking me that night and stealing from my house. Be glad I chose this path instead of giving this to the police." Kelly finally spoke. "Jack, how could you do this to me?" "Kelly, you've wasted my life. Your father and brothers always treated me like I wasn't good enough. And you've always been deceitful. You cheated on me with Larry Evandale, disrespected our marriage, and worst of all, you almost eliminated me in the attack. Tom and Carl broke my ribs, but it was your kicks that drove a broken rib into my lung. If the paramedics hadn't arrived in time, I would have died. Some best friend, huh?" Kelly fainted, and Amber and Carl rushed to catch her. Once she regained consciousness, I delivered my final words. Your father sold me his stock to keep you out of jail. He's not proud of his children, except for Amber. I've wasted enough time on you, Kelly. I won't waste any more. Have a nice life. With that, I left. The deals were done, I was free, and Kelly and I divorced. A few months later, the siblings were arrested for attack after the video was sent to the police. Kelly's father was furious and came to confront me, but he had a stroke before I could respond. Karma works in strange ways.